My son's wife said let her sleep on the floor. Now she regrets everything. I still can't quite put my finger on it. Was it an overabundance of pride, a sudden wave of panic, or just plain old unyielding stubbornness? Whatever the catalyst, when my daughter-in-law declared, with a surprising amount of conviction, that she'd genuinely prefer to sleep on our unforgiving hardwood floor rather than grace the plush comfort of our guest room bed, the words just flew out of her mouth. Honestly, it sounded like she'd been rehearsing that dramatic monologue for weeks. We, my husband and I, exchanged a bewildered glance, managed a shrug, handed her a blanket that felt woefully inadequate for the task, and then, rather perplexingly, turned in for the night ourselves. Fast forward a mere 8 hours, and there she was, a sniffling, tear-streaked mess, practically bawling in the hallway, offering apologies to anyone within earshot, and probably to the walls themselves. Trust me on this one. The reason she completely cracked before the sun had even properly risen is a story far messier, far more tangled, and infinitely more dramatic than the initial bizarre demand itself. So, if you're ready for a tale of unexpected twists and feline retribution, you're in for a treat. My son's wife, Marissa, looked me dead in the eye, and I mean dead in the eye, and uttered those unforgettable words, "Just let me sleep on the floor." At the time, I honestly thought it was some kind of peculiar power move, a really weird flex, as the kids say. I mean, who does that? But then, as the evening deepened, the house went completely dark. The autumn temperature outside plummeted, and a very specific brand of karma, wrapped in fur and armed with 4 little paws, crept silently into our lives. By the time dawn reluctantly broke, she regretted absolutely everything. And believe me when I tell you, the cold, hard floor was nowhere near the worst part of her unforgettable night, not by a long shot. It all began on a crisp, almost winter Friday in late October. My husband, bless his patient heart, and I call a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom colonial home, nestled just outside the bustling energy of Richmond, Virginia. It's a quiet, tree-lined street, the kind where neighbors wave and kids still ride bikes. Our youngest, our adventurous daughter, had flown the coop years ago, chasing dreams and mountain air out in Colorado. So, naturally, the spare rooms had settled into a rather predictable rhythm of collecting dust bunnies, serving as temporary storage for holiday decorations, and occasionally housing the overflow of gifts we swore we'd organize someday. When our son Evan called, his voice brimming with that particular brand of newlywed excitement, to announce he and his new wife Marissa were driving in for the weekend, a flurry of activity erupted. I immediately sprang into action. Out came the fresh, crisp sheets for the guest bed. I meticulously stocked the fridge with all their favorite snacks and, yes, even some of Marissa's preferred organic teas. And I vacuumed. Oh, how I vacuumed. I attacked every nook and cranny, every forgotten corner, with the kind of intense fervor usually reserved for an impending health inspector's visit. I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect, you see. Marissa had only visited twice since their wedding, and both trips, while perfectly polite, had been undeniably quick, a little stiff, and, if I'm being honest, just slightly awkward. She's one of those fascinating individuals who manages to smile with her mouth, but her eyes, well, her eyes remain curiously aloof, almost guarded. If you know what I mean, you know that particular brand of social enigma. Still, I clung to the hopeful notion that a truly cozy guest room, thoughtfully adorned with fresh-cut flowers and a gently flickering candle, would somehow manage to thaw whatever lingering frost seemed to perpetually surround her. I pictured her relaxing, finally letting her guard down, and truly feeling like part of the family. They rolled up our driveway just as dusk began to paint the sky in hues of deep purple and orange, tired but buzzing from the 4-hour drive up from North Carolina. Evan, my ever-enthusiastic son, bounded in first. His duffel bag was slung carelessly over one shoulder, a familiar wide grin plastered across his face. the very same grin he'd worn as a mischievous boy, back when he used to leave his latest frog habitats in my Tupperware containers. Marissa followed, a stark contrast to Evan's boisterous entry. She was sleek, composed, her dark ponytail swinging perfectly, designer sneakers pristine, and pulling behind her a rolling suitcase that seemed disproportionately large, almost the size of a smart car. It was quite the entrance. We exchanged the usual flurry of hugs, a bit of polite small talk about the traffic, and soon, the comforting aroma of my homemade lasagna wafted through the house. It was all very normal stuff, the kind of easy, familiar ritual that makes a family gathering feel just right. After we'd all eaten our fill and cleared the table, I turned to them, my voice full of pride. "All right, you two," I announced. "Let me show you to your room." I led them down the hall, my heart fluttering with a little anticipation, and with a flourish, I opened the door to the guest room, adding a little, almost theatrical, "ta-da!" The room was indeed lovely. The queen-sized bed boasted a luxurious pillow-top mattress, a cloud-like down comforter, and, if I'm being honest, about 9 throw pillows. My sister, the self-proclaimed interior design guru, insists they are excessive but absolutely necessary for that touch of hotel-level luxury. I expected, at the very least, a polite nod of appreciation, perhaps even a murmured, "How lovely." Instead, Marissa walked into the room, took a slow, deliberate sniff, then delicately poked the duvet with one perfectly manicured finger. "This room feels stuffy," she declared, her voice surprisingly flat. "Do you have somewhere else I could crash?" Evan, bless his innocent heart, blinked twice, then a third time, his mouth slightly agape. He was clearly blindsided, completely unprepared for this curveball. My husband, ever the diplomat, quickly offered, "Well, we do have a very comfortable couch in the living room, Marissa. You're welcome to that." She shook her head, a dismissive gesture. No, that won't be necessary," she insisted, her tone firm. "I'll just take a blanket and sleep on your hardwood floor. I genuinely prefer a firm surface." I actually laughed, a small, nervous laugh, thinking she was obviously joking, perhaps trying to be quirky or self-deprecating. But the unwavering look in her eyes, the set of her jaw, quickly disabused me of that notion. She wasn't joking, not one bit. Now, let me tell you, I've hosted my fair share of picky guests over the years. My cousin, for instance, insists on hypoallergenic linens, citing some obscure allergy to, well, everything, it seems. And my book club friend, bless her eccentric heart, always arrives with her own pillow, meticulously encased in a repurposed grocery bag, convinced that no other pillow can match her specific neck support requirements. I've learned to roll with it, to adapt, to provide. But refusing a perfectly comfortable queen-sized pillow-top bed, complete with excessive but necessary throw pillows, only to opt for the unyielding planks of a hardwood floor. That, my friends, was a new and utterly baffling frontier in guest preferences. Evan, looking increasingly uncomfortable and mortified, mumbled something vague about Marissa's back issues, though his flushed face and darting eyes screamed pure, unadulterated embarrassment. It was less an explanation and more a desperate plea to diffuse the rapidly escalating awkwardness. I, still trying to be the gracious hostess, pressed on. "Are you absolutely sure, Marissa?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and accommodating. "We have the couch, of course, or there's an air mattress we could inflate. Even my husband's recliner is quite comfortable, if you just want to stretch out." I was practically rattling off a list of alternative sleeping arrangements, anything to avoid the sheer ridiculousness of the floor. But Marissa remained resolute, her conviction unwavering. The floor, she insisted, was perfectly fine. She repeated it like a mantra, as if saying it enough times would make it true for all of us. Finally, utterly flummoxed and seeing no other way out of the bizarre standoff, I caved. With a sigh that I hoped wasn't too audible, I retreated to the linen closet. I fetched the thickest, warmest quilt we owned, a relic from a long-forgotten camping trip, along with a dense foam camping mat and an extra, slightly flattened pillow. I presented them to her, feeling a mix of defeat and exasperation. To my surprise, she thanked me with an almost effusive gratitude, as if I'd just handed her the key to the presidential suite at the Ritz. It was a bizarre, almost theatrical display of appreciation for what amounted to glorified camping gear. My husband and I, still reeling from the surreal exchange, retreated to the sanctuary of our own bedroom. We spent a good 15 minutes whispering in bewildered tones about the perplexing habits of millennials and the latest, inexplicable chiropractic trends, until the sheer exhaustion of the day and the absurdity of the situation finally lulled us into a fitful sleep. Around 2:30 in the morning, a soft, almost imperceptible thud jolted me awake. It was followed quickly by a faint, shuffling sound. My first thought, naturally, was that it must be Marissa, perhaps making a quiet trip to the bathroom. I settled back into the warmth of my covers, trying to recapture sleep. But then, about 10 minutes later, a distinctly muffled yelp cut through the stillness of the house. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, undeniably animalistic, and utterly out of place. My mother's instinct, that primal, unshakable urge to investigate, kicked in instantly. I crept silently out of bed, my bare feet padding softly on the cool wooden floor, and peered cautiously into the darkened hallway. There, illuminated by the stark, ghostly glow of her phone's flashlight, was Marissa. She was crouched low beside the stairs, her figure a hunched silhouette in the dim light, her eyes wide and darting, reflecting the tiny beam of her screen like a startled animal. She looked disheveled and undeniably shaken. "Marissa, are you all right?" I whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet house. She jumped, startled, her flashlight beam swinging wildly for a moment before settling back on her face. Yes, I'm fine," she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that trembled unmistakably. I just needed some water." It was an excuse so flimsy, so transparent, it barely hung together in the still night air. I could see the goosebumps on her arms, the slight tremor in her hands. She clearly wasn't fine. "Are you sure?" I pressed gently, genuinely concerned. "You know, if the floor isn't working out, the couch is still available. Or I could even set up that air mattress now if you'd like," I offered, trying to keep my tone neutral, devoid of any "I told you so" smugness. But Marissa, as if suddenly remembering her earlier stubborn declaration, straightened up, squared her shoulders with a defiant stiffness, and snapped, her voice regaining a surprising edge. "I said I'm fine." "All right." Message received, loud and clear. It was a firm rebuff, a clear boundary drawn in the dark. I nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of her insistence, and reluctantly retreated back to my bedroom. But the uneasy feeling, that prickle of something being not quite right, stuck to me like static cling, refusing to dissipate. Sleep, for the rest of the night, remained elusive, punctuated by a growing sense of dread. What Marissa hadn't mentioned, what, in fairness, none of us had any earthly way of knowing, was that our geriatric, yet surprisingly spry cat, Pickles, had decided to make a cozy, pre-bedtime nest under that very quilt when Marissa so cavalierly spread it out on the floor. Pickles, you see, is a venerable 16 years old. She's half blind, mostly deaf, and weighs about 4 pounds soaking wet. A tiny, fluffy bundle of ancient feline wisdom and occasional mischief. She'd burrowed deep into the folds of the quilt hours earlier, seeking warmth and solitude, a creature of habit. So, when Marissa finally lay down, perhaps with a dramatic sigh of self-satisfaction at her perceived resilience, Pickles must have been rudely awakened. Perhaps she felt the sudden shift, the unexpected weight, the tremor of an intruder in her chosen sanctuary. Whatever the trigger, at precisely 3:15 in the morning, an unholy, blood-curdling shriek ripped through the otherwise silent house. It wasn't human, not entirely, but it was certainly not entirely feline either. It was a sound that could curdle milk and raise the hairs on your neck. I bolted upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, and flung myself out of the room. I burst into the hallway just in time to see Marissa, who had clearly bolted upright herself, flinging the offending blanket aside with a wild, desperate gesture. And there, clinging with all 4 sets of tiny, razor-sharp claws to the hem of her expensive silk shorts, like a miniature, utterly furious koala, was Pickles. The poor cat, disoriented and terrified, had simply latched onto the nearest available surface. Marissa, in her panicked state, tried to shake the cat off, thrashing and yelping. This, predictably, only made Pickles dig her claws in deeper, a tiny, furry anchor of terror. The yowling of the cat, now a full-throated, indignant caterwaul, synced perfectly with Marissa's increasingly shrill shrieks, creating a truly unholy cacophony that, I swear, woke every single living creature within a mile radius. Evan, roused from his own slumber by the sheer volume of the chaos, came crashing out of his room, still half asleep. In his haste, he tripped spectacularly over Marissa's enormous rolling suitcase, which she'd inexplicably left directly in the hallway. He landed spread-eagle on the floor with a resounding thump, groaning in pain. My husband, ever the one to bring light to a situation, literally, finally flicked on the overhead lights, bathing the scene in a harsh, unflattering glow. The sight that greeted us was something out of a very strange, very frantic comedy. Marissa was on her knees, mascara streaking down her face in black rivulets, tears mixing with what I can only assume was pure terror, yelling at the top of her lungs, "Get it off! Get it off me! Oh my God, get it off!" God. Get. It took both my husband and me, working carefully and quickly, to gently but firmly unhook the terrified, clinging feline from Marissa's silk shorts. Once liberated, Pickles, with an air of profound indignation and a flick of her tail, sauntered off, disappearing back into the shadows from whence she came. She left behind a scratched-up, mascara-streaked, utterly humiliated daughter-in-law, a dazed son on the floor, and a rather impressive trail of shed fur, a silent testament to the night's unexpected drama. Nobody, not a single soul in our household went back to sleep that night. The adrenaline, the shock, the sheer absurdity of it all had shattered any hope of further slumber. Marissa, still trembling slightly, found herself perched rather uncomfortably on the living room sofa at 4 a.m, an ice pack clutched to her thigh, where Pickles had left a few rather impressive claw marks. She looked utterly defeated, her earlier defiance completely evaporated. She was, in short, a picture of profound regret, and then the apologies started. They flowed out of her in a torrent, directed at everyone and everything. She apologized to the cat, to Evan, to the very floor itself, to my husband, to me, to anyone within earshot, and probably to the silent furniture as well. Over and over she kept repeating, a mantra of self-recrimination. I shouldn't have been so stubborn. I really shouldn't have been so stubborn. It was clear that the night's events, particularly the unexpected feline encounter, had completely dismantled her carefully constructed facade of self-sufficiency. Seeing her so utterly humbled, so genuinely remorseful, I felt a pang of something akin to pity, mixed with a healthy dose of vindication. "Marissa," I said gently, "the guest bed is still made up. The pillow-top mattress is waiting." Before I could even finish the sentence, before the words had fully left my lips, she accepted. Her head bobbed up and down in a vigorous nod, a desperate plea for comfort. Without another word, she stumbled towards the guest room, a phantom limb of dread still clinging to her. By sunrise, when the first golden rays began to stream through the window, she was curled up under the down comforter, deeply, blissfully asleep, snoring with the robust, uninhibited gusto of a seasoned trucker. The contrast to her earlier pronouncements about firm surfaces was almost comically stark. When she finally emerged from the guest room at noon, her eyes puffy and slightly swollen from a combination of tears and deep sleep, she didn't offer a perfunctory peck on the cheek. Instead, she hugged me. A long, heartfelt embrace that lasted longer than strictly necessary. And then, she whispered, her voice still a little hoarse. "I regret everything I said last night. Every single word. I was trying so hard to prove that I didn't need special treatment, that I was low maintenance, and I ended up needing first aid instead." I just held her for a moment, patting her back gently. "Honey," I told her, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "We all make dramatic entrances into the family eventually. Yours just happened to come with a few extra claw marks and a story we'll never forget." It was a moment of genuine connection, a shared vulnerability that finally broke through the awkwardness that had lingered between us. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. It was Evan. His voice, usually so cheerful, held a slight note of concern, but also a definite undercurrent of amusement. "Mom," he began, trying to stifle a chuckle. "Marissa's developed a bit of a weird rash along those scratches." My heart sank for a moment, picturing some terrible infection. But Evan quickly reassured me. They'd been to the doctor, who, after a thorough examination, confirmed the diagnosis. Ringworm. Yes, you heard that right. Ringworm. Courtesy, it turns out, of Pickles' rather adventurous outdoor excursions, which, despite her age, still involved a surprising amount of clandestine hunting and exploring in the neighborhood. The treatment plan was simple enough, if a little inconvenient. A course of antifungal cream, and much to Marissa's chagrin, a week of soothing oatmeal baths. I could almost hear her groaning through the phone. But then, to my immense relief, Evan's voice brightened. "On the bright side," he said, "she's finally laughing about it, Mom. Genuinely laughing." He then put me on speaker, and I heard Marissa's voice, a little raspy but full of genuine mirth. "Next time your mom offers me a pillow top," she declared, her voice still holding a hint of mock exasperation, "I'm taking it with gratitude, and probably a side of Neosporin, just for good measure." It was a good-natured jab, a sign that the ice had truly broken. She then launched into another, more light-hearted apology for the entire debacle, her tone now laced with genuine humor rather than mortification. I laughed. A warm, genuine laugh this time. "Marissa," I told her, my voice full of affection, "the welcome mat, fur and all, stays out for you any time. But," I added, unable to resist a playful jab, "the floor, my dear, is officially, permanently, and irrevocably off limits." We all shared a good laugh, a moment of shared understanding that felt like a true turning point. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by a comfortable familiarity that had been missing. If you've ever had to navigate the treacherous waters of guest room drama, or perhaps found yourself contending with a pet who clearly harbors a deep-seated vendetta against unexpected sleepers, then do yourself a favor and smash that like button. Let YouTube know that we are not the only household out there running what often feels like a furry, unpredictable fight club. So, what profound wisdom, what invaluable insights did we manage to glean from this utterly chaotic, surprisingly painful, and ultimately hilarious fiasco? Quite a bit, actually. First and foremost, it became crystal clear that communication absolutely trumps pride, every single time. Marissa, in her earnest but misguided attempt to appear effortlessly low-maintenance and easygoing, ended up inadvertently creating a situation that spiraled into truly high drama. She wanted to avoid being a burden, to show she could adapt to anything. But that very desire to impress or prove something actually backfired spectacularly. Had she simply expressed her discomfort with a softer mattress or politely inquired about alternatives without the theatrical insistence on the floor, the entire nocturnal catastrophe could have been entirely averted. It was a stark reminder that sometimes, simply being honest about your needs, even if they seem a little particular, is far more efficient and less stressful than trying to put on a brave, stubborn face. Open communication, even about seemingly trivial things like sleeping arrangements, can prevent a world of misunderstanding and regret. It fosters trust and genuine connection, rather than creating barriers. Secondly, and this is a big one for any pet-owning household, pets are the ultimate wildcards. You can meticulously prep the guest room, fresh linens, fluffy towels, a welcoming scent. But you absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, fully prep the 16-year-old tabby with boundary issues and a penchant for burrowing. Pickles, in her ancient half-blind wisdom, was merely acting on instinct, defending what she perceived as her prime sleeping territory. Her actions, while inconvenient and rather painful for Marissa, were entirely predictable for anyone who knew our quirky feline. It's a lesson in remembering that our furry, or feathered or scaled, family members are sentient beings with their own routines, preferences, and, yes, even their own territorial instincts. They add an element of delightful, yet sometimes chaotic, unpredictability to any social gathering. And finally, perhaps the most heartwarming lesson of all: humility truly heals. Once Marissa finally admitted with a genuine sigh of relief and a healthy dose of self-deprecating humor that she had completely overplayed her tough girl routine, the entire mood shifted. The tension that had subtly lingered between us, that unspoken awkwardness, simply dissipated. It was as if a heavy, invisible cloak had been lifted from her shoulders and from our collective family dynamic. Her willingness to be vulnerable, to laugh at herself, and to genuinely apologize for her stubbornness allowed for true connection. It transformed her from the slightly aloof daughter-in-law into a beloved member of the family who had just, well, had a really, really memorable and painful initiation. She and Pickles, believe it or not, now share a cautious truce. It involves a very specific brand of salmon-flavored treats, carefully supervised visitation, mostly from a safe distance, and the occasional, almost imperceptible, head nuzzle from Pickles, which Marissa now, surprisingly, finds endearing. It's a testament to the power of admitting when you've wrong and finding humor in life, its most unexpected moments. The fallout from that memorable night, while initially fraught with drama, has now firmly cemented itself as a cherished family legend, a tale often retold with much laughter and exaggerated gestures around the dinner table. My husband, for instance, still chuckles, a deep, rumbling sound, every single time he walks past that particular stretch of hallway where the catastrophe unfolded. He'll shake his head, a wry smile playing on his lips, and sometimes, if he's feeling particularly mischievous, he'll even mimic Marissa's panicked shrieks, much to her feigned annoyance. Evan, ever the tech-savvy millennial, couldn't resist sharing the absurdity with the wider world. He posted a rather blurry photo of Pickles, looking utterly innocent, mind you, as if butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, on Reddit, with the perfectly understated caption, "My cat, the marriage counselor." The comment section, as you can imagine, absolutely exploded. Strangers from across the globe chimed in, roasting Marissa, all in good fun, of course, and sharing their own equally bizarre, often hilarious, stories. There were tales of unfortunate souls who insisted on sleeping on floors, only to wake up to lizards scuttling across their chests, possums rummaging through their blankets, and once, alarmingly, and I still shiver thinking about it, a full-grown raccoon snuggled up in their sleeping bag. It turns out that weird in-law moments, especially those involving unexpected wildlife, are a universal hobby, a shared human experience that transcends cultural boundaries. It made us all realize that our little family drama wasn't so unique after all, but part of a much larger global tapestry of domestic chaos. If you enjoyed this little peek into our family chaos and want more stories that prove truth is stranger and funnier than fiction, then hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We deliver fresh doses of family drama, witty observations, and unexpected animal encounters weekly. And please, do us a favor and comment below with your most awkward guest moment, bonus points of course, if any form of wildlife was unexpectedly involved. We're all in this together, and sometimes a good laugh is the best medicine. So, there you have it. That's the epic tale of how a single, seemingly innocuous blanket spread on a hardwood floor somehow managed to escalate into a full-blown medical saga. A profound lesson in humility. And perhaps most importantly, a lifetime family joke that will undoubtedly be retold for generations. My daughter-in-law, in a moment of misplaced pride, demanded the floor. The cat, in a moment of pure instinctual territorial defense, delivered a swift, furry dose of karma. And the guest bed, once scorned, gained a permanent, appreciative occupant. Marissa, now fully recovered and much wiser, claims that the scars, both the physical ones from Pickle's claws and the emotional ones to her ego, were entirely worth the lesson learned. I, on the other hand, simply claim that from here on out, we'll be serving up generous portions of both lasagna and humility at every single family gathering. As for Pickles, our venerable tiny and now legendary feline, she's currently snoozing peacefully on the very quilt that started it all, curled up in a sunbeam, dreaming no doubt of her next midnight ambush, completely unaware of the indelible mark she's left on our family history.